Hey everybody, welcome to Life is Beautiful. I'm Anthony, and today I want to talk about something a little bit different on this channel. I want to talk about some of the lesser known beer styles. I've noticed that there are a ton of little tiny, sometimes regionally exclusive beer styles that are similar to bigger styles, but here in Europe they have their own defined history and culture and methodology behind them. So today I want to talk about two very interesting styles that caught my eye as soon as I got here, and that is the Kellerbier and the Zwickels. Now, what interests me so much about the Zwickels and the Kellerbier is that it's not so much a style in that typical sense. It's just a style defined by its process, by its aging, by its storage. Keller in German is cellar, and a Kellerbier is a cellar beer. So a Kellerbier is any beer that was particularly maybe brewed, but particularly stored and aged in a cellar. I find that so interesting because depending on where you go, what brewery you buy it from, what region you're in, kind of defines what the Kellerbier is. Even brewery to brewery in the same town could have a completely different appearance, flavor, aroma, just completely different than the neighboring brewery's Kellerbier. For example, when I was in Leipzig, the home of the Goza, I noticed a couple of different Kellerbiers for sale there, but when I drank them, it completely blew my mind. They were salty, they were sour, and that's when I saw a sign saying that the Goza was a Kellerbier because it was the beer that particular establishment had going, aging, chilling, growing in its cellar. It's possible you could get a Pilsner Kellerbier. It's possible you could get a Schwarzbier Kellerbier or the Goza, as I mentioned. Now, I will say there is some similarity. The majority of Kellerbiers are blonde. They are nice and crisp and clean, and they have a beautiful white head on top of them, and they very much resemble the majority of Germany's white beers. So since that is the majority of Kellerbiers that you are going to find if you pick one up, those are going to be the ones I kind of focus on mostly today, especially since those are the ones that you will find the most commercial examples of. Most records indicate that Kellerbier originated in Franconia around the Middle Ages. However, like most German styles, it didn't really get popular. It didn't really become a huge landmark, a huge staple in the beer scene until it became popular in Bavaria. The majority of Kellerbiers are brewed with a decoction mash, and they make up a malt bill of mostly pale malt, but can have up to 20, 30, 50% wheat if, that's what the brewer wants. However, if it does contain too much wheat, there are some examples of Kellerweisens being sold. Kellerbiers are usually brewed, fermented like a lager, and then stored in the cold, damp, dark cellar like a lager as well. So they have a lot of lager characteristics: smooth, clean, a little bit rounder on the body, not quite as vibrant, popping, or aggressive as an ale. But that's not to say that there aren't some with ale yeast as well. Like I said, it could be kind of anything. Historically, Kellerbiers were only brewed and oftentimes only served in the cellar. With modern day demand and production, you will find a lot more of them on the shelves. So it doesn't quite have the same effect as it would if you were to get it down in the cellar of a brewery. But yeah, it is what it is. If you are to drink one of these Kellerbiers straight from the source, it is usually completely uncarbonated or very, 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 very lightly carbonated, because during its fermenting and its aging process, it is usually in the cask opened. There is no bung on it, so all the CO2 escapes. Be noted that because they do go through an open fermentation and there's not a whole lot of pasteurization, if any at all, they do have an incredibly short lifespan. So pretty much as soon as spring hits and the weather gets warm enough for you to sit out in the beer garden, they crack them open, they pour them, and when the casks are done, they're done. And you won't see them again till next spring. Because it is constantly fermenting while it's going through the aging process down in the cellar, it does oftentimes come out with a little bit more dry feel to it. It's a little more well attenuated because they allow fermentation to continue on for so much longer. But despite that, it still maintains a fuller body. It still maintains a very smooth, creamy characteristic, and it's absolutely jam-packed with flavor without being too alcoholic. It's a low ABV, usually ranging in between the 4 to 5.5%. It makes it the perfect beer for hot summer days, which is particularly when these beers are served. Kellerbiers don't really have any specific type of glass style as you would find with some other styles like Hefeweizens or Goses or Berliner Weisses. Instead, they're usually served in a thick, opaque ceramic mug because back in the day when they were starting to get popular, they were kind of viewed as an ugly beer. And if they were served in the mug, you wouldn't really notice its ugly appearance. Kind of funny how things have changed. I don't know why I'm so fascinated with these. I just really am. Something about the concept of Germany having an entire definition for a style of the Kellerbier simply because it is an long-aged, lagered, or sometimes ale beer that was brewed in a cellar. Incredibly interesting to me. The next beer I want to talk about is the Zwickel. Zwickel. I don't know. It's kind of hard with German pronunciations. I've heard a lot of different dialects say it, and it's all kind of slightly different. So for all extensive purposes, I'm just going to continue to call it the Zwickel because I like the way that sounds. Zwickel beers are Kellerbiers, all right? But Kellerbiers aren't necessarily Zwickel beers. As I mentioned, the Kellerbier is fermented in the open casks for all winter basically and drank in the spring or the summer. Zwickels are beers that are poured from those casks early. When spring comes, if they don't want to release this till summer, they'll sometimes pop these open and let you drink them in the springtime. It gets its name from a specialized tool that the brewers use to extract the beer from the cask called a Zwickelhahn. Because of its lack of maturity, its flavor profile kind of follows exactly what you would think this beer is. It's just like this, just less mature. So that can mean a little more yeast characteristics. It can mean a little bit of a sharper edge on the hops. It can also mean that it kind of still has that raw, unrefined, grainy characteristic that you get in some less well-made homebrews. And because of that rawness, that lack of maturity, it does kind of give the brewer and the public a little window into the future, what it will eventually become. And that's kind of a unique experience all in of itself. As with the Kellerbier, where it kind of got its name and its style definition because of the fact that it was brewed, fermented, aged, served in a cellar, the Zwickel beer is almost completely defined by its method of retrieval, where if you were to take this beer and pour it straight out the cask into your glass after it's finished, okay, whatever. That is a Kellerbier from the cellar, from the tap. This one has to be extracted and removed, leaving some behind to continue fermenting for it to technically be considered a Zwickel. It's just funny to me that one act is the defining characteristic. That is the variable that separates these two styles. And because of that, just like the Kellerbier, technically any beer could be a Zwickel beer. Once again, you could have a Gose Zwickel, you could have a Berliner Weisse Zwickel, you could have a Hefeweizen. As long as it's removed from the cask during fermentation and served to the general public, it's a Zwickel. So that pretty much sums up everything I want to talk about for the Kellerbier and the Zwickel beer. I just absolutely love these two styles because in the States, everyone's so preoccupied. Like, these are the boxes, BJCP, Cicerone, put them into a little category and move it on. I just love the fact that here in, one of the great beer brewing lands of the entire planet, they just have such odd little things like these that just separate them from everything else. It's just so funny to me that where it's stored and where it's served or how it's removed completely define the styles. If you are interested in drinking Kellerbiers or Zwickels, I have seen both of these for commercial retail in the States. They're not very common, but you can find them, especially this bad boy right here. I've seen these a lot. If you find yourself here, you have to seek out Kellerbiers and Zwickels in their natural habitat. It is a unique and enjoyable experience unlike any other. So thank you very much for watching. I really do hope you enjoyed, and I hope you learned something about these lesser known styles. And I hope you learned a little bit about Germany's odd brewing culture. It's just such an odd, unique place to be. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. Like, comment, subscribe. Remember, there is a story in every bottle, and that life is beautiful. Cheers.